Hey, this is Scott Henson from Dallas Baptist Church, pastor. I want to talk to you today about Thanksgiving. We'll be preaching Sunday from Habakkuk, talking about Thanksgiving. It's not really the place you'd really go to for Thanksgiving as far as book goes, but there's some thankfulness in Habakkuk, or Habakkuk, as my Jewish friends would say. We're going to look today at Psalms chapter 9. Before I get into Psalm chapter 9, or Psalm 9, I should say, we'll talk a little bit about the Psalms themselves. Just recently re-recorded a video for my class at Gardner Webb I'm teaching, talking about the Psalms. And when we look at the Psalms, we have to remember that there are different genres of Psalms. Like there's different types of poems. There's different genres of music. Most of us are more familiar with genres of music. I mean, you've got country music, you've got rock and roll music, you've got jazz. And even within those types of genres, you have subgenres. You have kind of your honky-tonk country music. You have your, pop country. You got your classic country. Rock and roll, you got, kind of a bluesy rock. You've got alternative rock. And there's different elements in these different types of genres of songs and music. If you think about country music, there's that old joke about if you play a country song backwards, you get your wife back, your car back, your dog back, and your trailer back. That's a joke, mind you. But there's different elements to those psalms. Well, in the Psalms, there's different elements to the different genres of psalms. Psalms of praise have there's certain types of elements, usually a call to worship, a praise is almost in every one of those psalms, and an actual praising of God. You have dirges and laments and complaints that have different elements as well. The laments and complaints often have a complaint, a confession of sin, or a confession of innocence. There's usually a plea for help or petition. There's some sort of imprecation against the enemies. Now, what we're going to look at today are Psalms of Thanksgiving, and there's several Psalms of Thanksgiving that genre of psalm in the Psalter. Psalm chapter 9 is one I want us to look at today. It's recounting God's wonderful deeds. I'm going to read just a few verses of it, and then we'll talk about it a little bit more. It says, I will give thanks to the Lord with my whole heart. I will recount all of your wonderful deeds. So there's usually these psalms begin with some sort of invitation to thankfulness. And we find here the psalmist says a psalm of David here, so it may have been David who wrote this. It says, I will give thanks to the Lord with my whole heart. As we reflect on Thanksgiving, as we get ready for the season, let's don't be like our popular culture. Even in a COVID year, it's been a little more accelerated. But in normal years, most of the stores will put out Christmas stuff as soon as Halloween's over. And people, even today, to try to cheer up themselves in the midst of the COVID pandemic, they're starting to put up Christmas decorations even earlier. Some people put up their Christmas decorations as soon as Halloween was over at their home. For me, that's overkill, but that's just me, right? I mean, when I was growing up, I didn't put Christmas decorations up to my birthday, which is December 14th. But we need to not forget and not gloss over Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving with my whole heart. I will give thanksgiving to the Lord with my whole heart, is what the psalmist writes. I will recount all of your wonderful deeds, he says. The old hymn says, count your blessings, name them one by one. We have so many blessings going on. We got up this morning. We took a breath. Almost every one of us is able to eat something for food. We're relatively healthy, most of us. And even if we're not totally where we want to be health-wise, things could always be worse. They may be better. They could be better, but they could always be worse. We need to be thankful for every moment of blessing. I'm not some independently wealthy, rich individual, but God has really blessed me. I have a good family, a good home. I'm alive. I serve a great church. God has really blessed me. So give thanks to the Lord with a whole heart. Verse 2, I will be glad and exult in you. I will sing praise to your name, O Most High. Now, verses 3 through 8 recount some of the mess that the psalmist went through, some of the tumult. And usually these psalms of thanksgiving were given in the ancient worship setting of ancient Israel. They were read after maybe some sort of problem. Some sort of issue had arisen. And the psalmist here wrote this as a response to some sort of issue, that the thanksgiving is given in response to what God has done. Verse 3 says, when my enemy turned back, they stumbled and perished before your presence. It goes on to say, "For you have maintained my just cause. You have sat on the throne giving righteous judgment. You have rebuked the nations. You have made the wicked perish. You have blotted out their name forever and ever. The enemy came to an end in everlasting ruins. Their city you rooted out. The very memory of them has perished. But the Lord sits enthroned forever. He established He established his throne for justice. He judges the world with righteousness. He judges the peoples with uprightness." So the Psalm of Thanksgiving, again, always has this one little section where the recounting of the problems that the psalmist has gone through, that David has gone through, as possibly in this case. And it gives a thanksgiving for it. What has God brought you through this year? Now, maybe he hasn't blotted out your enemies and rooted out their cities, and this kind of this very antiquated, ancient description here. I mean, I don't think we're going to type of warfare that the ancient Israelites would have gone into, but God has done something in your life this year that you should thank him for. Maybe this week. Something he's done this week you should thank him for. This day, maybe. But God has brought us through some trials. He continues to bring us through trials. And we should thank him with our whole heart. You know, so far, this pandemic, I'm thankful that our church has not been hit harder than it could have been. I've heard of churches being far worse. I'm thankful that those who in this church have contracted it, for the most part, have done well. A few little hiccups here and there. No one in my immediate family as of today has contracted the virus. I'm thankful for that. But I'm thankful for those in our extended church family who have gotten it, who have come through. I'm thankful that I'm alive. I'm thankful that even if something were to happen, God is still enthroned forever, as verse 7 says. God's still in control. Even though life doesn't feel like it sometimes, and life is chaotic and crazy, even more so in this election year that was in the midst of a pandemic, God is still in control. It may not be what we want. It may not be puppy dogs and sunshine and rainbows, but God is still good. And sometimes counting the blessings may seem a little harder. You may have to think a little deeper, but we're still overly blessed. So in the midst of the trials, in the midst of life, thank God. Not just thank him, but thank him with your whole heart, with everything of our being. Praise be to God.